Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Josh and I mess about with cars. You might have seen me on TikTok or Instagram potentially reviewing cars in my own little style, or maybe you've just come across me on YouTube randomly. But the main part is that you're here. And if you're interested in cars and you've got an unhealthy obsession with them like I do, consider subscribing to the channel for more content. But enough of the waffling, let's get into today's video. Now behind me is my brand new to me E91 BMW 320d Touring, finished in a beautiful metallic grey colour with a nice cream interior. Let's review it. This car has some really cool factory extras that were spec'd when it was new. Take a look, for example, at these kick plates, which have an M Sport logo indicating that this car is indeed an M Sport car. We've got cream leather chairs and the cream door cards as well, full grandad spec. We've also got a panoramic roof, which is by no means a common option on these cars. And we've got a black headline in just there, which is another factory extra. And might I add, the black headline is possibly my favorite part of this car. It just really goes with the cream interior. Moving further inside, we've got an M Sport gear knob, which is a nice little touch. Doesn't add any performance whatsoever, but it's a nice touch. Also, the M Sport steering wheel, which is really one of the essential factors for me. It just makes driving this car an absolute pleasure. Not to mention as well, we've also got heated seats down there. We've got cruise control as well, and we've got auto lights and wipers. This car really is a fully loaded spec. My Beamer is also fitted with M Sport suspension, which in my opinion is an absolute necessity. It transforms the handling of this car. For an almost 20-year-old car, it's really quite tight and nimble. The steering is nice and heavy, which when you're around town isn't too ideal, but when you're on a spirited sort of B road, driving a little bit more aggressively, which is quite a rare occasion for a wagon like this, it does hold its own. And this car's actually recently had new rear shocks and rear top mounts, and you can really tell the difference. It's quite tight. These M47 engines are known for their reliability and their economy, and both of those I can attest to. I've only owned the car a week, but it's on 161,000 miles and it doesn't miss a beat. It hasn't struggled to start, it's never struggled to run, nothing like that. It's been completely fine the whole time that I've driven it. I've probably done roughly 300-400 miles in it in about a week, which is a lot, and I can't fault it. It's really lovely to drive this car around. The 4-cylinder diesel is absolutely standard, apart from having a swirl flap delete, which was done by a previous owner. Something that is quite good if you have a car like this with the M47 engine. They do suffer quite badly with the swirl flaps, so it's best to just get rid of them full stop. The power is there. It's not really anything to shout about. It's sufficient for everyday driving, but it's by no means blow your socks off. But I'm not complaining. It's a wagon, it's practical, and for its size, it's really quite good at putting the power down, especially being a manual as well. I just feel like it's a nicer driving experience overall if you're an enthusiast like myself. Could it be a better car with a stage 1 map, for example? Well, I'm pretty sure it takes it towards 200 horsepower with a stage 1 tune. Yes, it could be beneficial, but for now it's going to stay absolutely standard, at least until I get used to the car, so that I could appreciate the benefit of a map a little bit more if I do get it done. And I touched on the service history of this car. It is extensive. It's had 2 turbos in its life. This one that it's on is the 3rd turbo that this engine's had. It had one under warranty when it was new, I think a few years in, from what I can see, and then it had another one a couple of years ago. So for me, I've got no concerns about reliability. It runs as it should, it gets up to temperature, the aircon is ice cold, which for a 2006 BMW, as you probably know, is quite a rare occasion. And if you can forgive the fact that it sounds like an old tank at war, and it does smell a little bit of diesel because it's an old diesel engine, and this one is a pre-DPF, so again, not so good for emissions. But if you can get past all of that, these cars really do serve as reliable and trustworthy dailies. One thing that is and always has been true is that BMW do really know how to put an interior together. All of the materials are lovely. Everything's coated in leather, or it's nice squidgy rubbery plastic. There's no scratchy plastics anywhere like you'd find on maybe a Renault, for example. It's just really quite lovely and refined in here. Moving to the back of this BMW, it's much the same story. Unlike other manufacturers who tend to make the rear worse quality than the front for some reason, rear passengers will have no complaints in this car. Headroom is a little bit tight. I'm just under 5'11", and to be honest, there isn't really much room. And leg room is fine though. With my seat in its normal position, which if anyone knows me, I drive really far back, it's fine. I've got plenty of knee room. I've got adequate room for my feet as well. And crucially, if you've got a family and you've got children that you're carrying back here, the ISOFIX anchor points are easily accessible when you take these covers off down here. Not really relevant for me because the closest thing I've got to a child is my dog Basil. Just a side note about those ISOFIX anchor points. I said that they're great and you can really get to them easily. You can. However, refitting this cover is an absolute nightmare. I've been spending 5 minutes just now trying to get it to clip back in place. Minor complaint, but it's relevant. One thing about this tailgate which is brilliant is that it is split. So if you need to chuck something in really quickly, you can just open the glass, lob it in, job's a good one. And also, I spoke about my dog earlier. This car luckily has got a built-in dog guard just here, which is pretty handy. Also, you might notice I've got my tools in the back of here because BMW only owned it a week. You never know. One thing that I'm dying to make right on this car is this bloody faded BMW badge on the rear. Apart from that, the rear of this car really is quite beautiful, but stuff like this really gets on my nerves, as I know a lot of car enthusiasts are the same. Little details drive you crazy, but apart from that, the rear of this car is really lovely. You've got kind of a minimal sort of boot lip spoiler, nothing too insane. But yeah, overall, I think they've aged really well. And I used to say I'd want an E46 over an E91 any day of the week, but since owning an E91, I really see the appeal of them. And actually, I think I'd take this any day now. There are a couple of other bits that need sorting out on this car. For example, these rear tyres are wearing a little bit low. So within the next month or so, I'll get some fresh rubber on there. And with it coming up to winter, this car being rear wheel drive as well, I'm going to need all the help I can get to get up those icy and snowy hills. Also, you've got the damage on this rear quarter, which is majority paint transfer really. So it might buff out. I'll give it a go. Who knows, that'll be a future video. And also these alloys, which I'm going to flash up a little image of now, are really not in the best condition. They could do with a refurb if we're being picky. As interiors go, there's really nothing that I'd change about this car. It is pretty much perfect, but there is one crucial part. It's got no Bluetooth. So at the moment, I'm demoted to using the aux cable like back in the day when I drove around in a Mark II Clio. One thing that isn't like my Clio, however, is how this 3 Series handles a motorway stint. Gone are the days of having horrible wheel judder above 65 miles an hour. This car is so sophisticated. It is by far the most refined car that I've ever owned. You put the cruise control on and you just sit here. It's chilled out, the seats are comfortable, there's no wind noise whatsoever, and maybe a little bit because of those sports bars that are fitted, but that's worth it for the style points. And yes, sometimes you do want a bit more power out of this car, there's no denying that. But similarly to when you ask a teenager to do the dishes, with a bit of a grumble and a little bit of time, it does eventually do what you've asked it to do. And I mentioned earlier about that M Sport suspension. It is brilliant for the handling. And yes, sometimes the potholes or the bumps might feel a little bit more harsh, but I'd say the trade-off is worth it to have a car that handles like this one does. And it's worth mentioning that the chunkier tyres that you get, because these wheels are slightly smaller, do help to mitigate some of the damage that you might suffer from having stiff suspension on this car. So just over a week of owning and driving my very first BMW, what do I think? Well, on the whole, it's been a very positive experience. It doesn't drink fuel, it's very comfortable, but it does still handle quite well. It's got enough space for my dog, for all of my filming equipment, etc. And it's just been the perfect daily to live with so far. Of course, there are things that need addressing, such as those rear tyres. We've got the alloys, we've got some brake lines that also need doing, which will be a future video. Stay tuned for that one because it's likely to go wrong. As you'll know, if you came from my TikTok, I had a Mark 6 Golf before this, a 2-litre TDI, and although it was great, it returned amazing fuel economy, it was cheap to tax, cheap to insure, I just didn't gel with it, I didn't bond with it. But this car, I've only owned it a week and I already love it 10 times more than I ever loved my Golf. But of course, I will revisit this car in a month's time, for example, and we'll see how I'm getting on then. But all that's left to say is I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking, subscribing, and maybe comment your favourite part of this car, and I will catch you in the next video. Thank you.